JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to the Inspire podcast. That is just what we are trying to accomplish here. My good friend Anshul, we are now on a quest, and it's really just to provide additional information, no real agenda. But what we're wanting to do is close the gap of some of the miscommunications and break down some of the barriers. We've got a number of guests that we have been bringing on, will bring on. We are going to be heading to India to do an in-person conference, more to come on that. But what we want to do now is reflect a little bit on what we've done so far with the podcast, what's coming up. Anshul, great to see you, my friend.
Yeah, great to see you too, JJ. Love what we're doing here. Super excited. And I was thinking for today's episode, let's just talk about the last guest we had, right? Jitendra, he's running a recruitment agency. So yeah, let's just reflect on that. So what was your biggest takeaway from that, from those two episodes that we did?
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, if you have not tuned into those episodes, check out the link. We've got part one, part two. And I really learned some good information. I was asking the questions, Anshul, that I think a lot of us are wondering, and we may have some of those similar questions with other guests, really thinking through the time zone issues as well as then ensuring of retention, talking about the benefits of employees. And really probably the biggest part was when you and Jitendra both were talking about the population of India, the educated population, the middle class, and the vast number of that in technology and AI. And in some ways, very competitive. In some areas, maybe I dare say ahead of us here in the US. But that would probably be the biggest barrier, I think, that we were trying to break down because we had an inside scoop. And I want to say I found it encouraging. I think I just found it reassuring, if you will, that when we're now talking about this global economy inside accounting, inside the CPA industry here specifically is what we're focused in on here, is that what we know is that as a CPA, number one, we want that quality. We want that due care. We want integrity in what is now being given or sold or provided, if you will, to our client. And I never have a doubt about it. Just working with you, getting to know some of the folks that we've already met, that is there. But especially after talking with Jitendra and with his group, I have no doubt, especially with his group, that there is due care, there is integrity, there is the intention to provide exactly, if not exceed, the expectations here on the side of the US. And the working conditions being the same as ours, if not a little better, the pay. Now, one of the things I'd love for us to reflect on a little bit, we didn't get really now into a specific story of one of Jitendra's team or staff, if you will, but you and I were talking. Anshul and I got together in New York City. We spent 9 hours straight just talking about the future of the CPA industry. But tied into what Jitendra was talking about, when I was visiting with you about, okay, hey, so a CPA firm here in the US, they want to bring on a bookkeeper. What would be the cost in US dollars? But more what I want to focus in on, I want our audience to hear though, is how that compensation moves somebody out of poverty, maybe provides different opportunities for them, specifically, maybe even talking about the female workforce in India. And so out of what we just talked about with Jitendra, I want to address that, even if you want to now first talk about something from just our recent guest, but I definitely
Yeah,
want to talk.
I think that's a great place to start, right? There's a couple of things, right? When we are paying people a lower wage, it's lower compared to the US. As you said, it's power of the dollar, right? It's not lower compared to the local standard. So we talked about, so I'll share a story. I shared this with you when we met in New York. For my first client, we hired like an office concierge. Now, this person's role is really to open the office, close the office, make sure this guy makes sure that there's office supplies. If you want to ship something, this person will make sure they ship it. They'll do the groceries. They'll take care of housekeeping. So they do all of that stuff that's probably outsourced in most US offices. Now, we were paying this guy maybe $300 a month, right? And my client was like, wait, what? We're paying them $300 a month? And they were just so uncomfortable with that. And they're like, does this person get a laptop? We're like, no, they're not going to be sitting in on team meeting. We can give them a cell phone because that's what they'll use to communicate. And I tried to explain to them that while this is a lot low compared to the US, this person was getting paid about 150 or $200 per month in their previous job. So here's after a year with us, that person bought a used car, got health insurance for himself and his aging parents, and excuse me, all of that for $300 a month, right? So we need to stop looking at what the wage in India does for us. And we need to start focusing on what that wage in India does for that person in India. So with $300 a month, you can buy a used car, you can get health insurance, not just for you, for your parents. So that says a bit about how things are inefficient in our part of world more than it does about how things are in India. And that's what lifting someone out of poverty looks like, right? When we say that India, China, they're lifting people out of poverty. This is what it looks like. Just a small amount. And now that person, they're probably making more, but they're treated with respect. They see growth opportunities. This person that doesn't speak English now is working for an American firm. So they can now take that experience and catapult in their career and move on to like bigger and better things. That's how we need to rewire our brain to think about. Did that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think when you and I were talking about that story, that would be somebody that doesn't have a designation, probably has not a ton of experience. And the thing for those to keep in mind on my perception of, wow, $300 is that's not why US companies are hiring people in India. Let's talk about the real thing that Jitender really does, what his company is accomplishing in helping US companies, which is this filling a need. We hear on social media that there's offshoring of jobs. And while that's technically actually what maybe some would think, there's no offshoring anything because this is not taking away not one instance that I ever came across. This has never taken away from somebody having a job here in the US in that CPA, accounting, tax pro, enrolled agent type of company. What it is, and we talked about this, that when somebody grows their firm, they now are stretched. They are not able to find talent. They're not able to find it in their backyard. They're probably having to find talent even in another state. So they're already having to be flexible in allowing for people to work elsewhere. But there's not the workforce to fill the need. One of the things I talk about in my book and my upcoming book is that 75% of CPAs right now are my age, 53 and older. In the next 15 years, they all will be retired, right? We're not just going to look up 15 years from now, but it's going to be less and less. My own personal experience in Oklahoma City, we're not a huge metroplex. I'm in a suburb, Edmond. And with that being said, we have had just in the last 6 months, 4 tax practitioners, CPA enrolled agents that have either unfortunately passed away, 2 of them just retired and were never to be heard from again. And the 4th was a retirement with no one to pass it on and literally making phone calls to just hand over clients so that they could be taken care of. So it's falling out of the sky in terms of need. And CPAs, we know that we need to have due care in our work. We can't just look to who's in our backyard to now fill these needs, especially with less working staff. And that's what this whole podcast is about, is inspiring. So Anshul, talk about this, back that up in terms of your direct experience with June 15 Consulting, your global company. You are connecting CPA firms, tax professionals directly with the talent in India. So I'd love for you to talk about that as well.
You're right. The biggest reason accounting firms are going to India or offshore is to find that talent, right? The fact that it's cheaper just helps, right? It helps you take that risk. It helps you with profitability. And when we talk about linking people directly, like, it's extremely important that we focus on the direct part. And I'll tell you why. 90% of CPA firms are small firms, right? A lot of the news, a lot of the agenda, I feel, is hijacked by these few hundred bigger firms, but not even a few hundred. I'd say the top 100, whatever they do, it just ends up being on the news more. But it's these smaller firms, right? They don't have mature processes. They don't have the technologies these bigger firms have. So they need more control for offshoring or anything to work. That's why it's important to connect them directly. And it's also about building trust, right? So we talked about wages. So one of the people I spoke to in Vegas at a conference, they said that I understand that I'm paying them okay wages, like good wages, but like I'm paying it to the agency. I have no idea what the actual employee is getting. So there's just a lack of trust and lack of transparency. That's why that going direct part helps. Yes, that means that you'll need to put in a little extra effort, but I believe that's the right way to do it. That's the only way I believe it works for most smaller CPA firms.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you are now directly working with CPA firms, tax professionals that are coming to you, coming to June 15 Consulting, really what is probably the vacancy? Like, let me just say, let's say that they are coming to you and they go, listen, I need this many new hires and I was only able to fill this percentage in the US. So what do you think you're specifically filling percentage wise of new talent? I'm not talking about the overall talent in a CPA firm, but when they now are growing, what percentage would you say your company is meeting by bringing talent from India?
That is very interesting. I haven't thought about it like that, but there is really very little new talent in the US. So anybody that's growing, right? They're bringing most of that talent from offshore, even if they're bringing it here in the US or working offshore. So it's hard to give a percentage, but if I had to, I would say at least half of what people are hiring is happening offshore. And it's not about preference. It's not about, it's just that's the only way out. So what I have seen is accounting firms moving away from should we offshore to how do we make it work? Because they've accepted that this is something we need to do. And now it's gone beyond just talent, right? Now it's like, all right, if I don't want to take in PE money and I want to be independent, I have to compete with these PE backed firms that have India offices. So I need to be able to have that capability to provide that round the clock client service, to be able to communicate with my clients. So it's just the use cases are changing and they're getting better and deeper.
Yeah, and I think 50% is definitely a fair percentage. Here's what my perception is when I've gone to conferences. I travel around the country providing continuing professional education from New York to Seattle to Orlando, San Diego, lots of cities, talking to CPA firms, enrolled agent firms. The small firms that you're talking about, those are those that are attending my continuing professional education seminars. And with that being said, I would actually put that percentage at 70%.
Oh,
And an informal poll, but the way I posed it to the audiences, and typically there's about 50 CPA firm owners in a typical audience that I am talking to, with maybe about 75 to 100 CPAs and enrolled agents. But of about those 50 owners, that'd be small practices similar to mine. If I said this, if you now had 10 new positions due to competition no longer there, meaning now it's falling out of the sky, the older generation is retiring, they have no one to sell it, no one's taking it over. So now you are bringing in new business without even trying. And let's just say that in the next year, you would predict that you would have 10 new positions in the accounting side. So that would be bookkeeper, tax preparer, tax reviewer, et cetera, right? And really across the board, it was at least 70%. And in some, it was 90%, meaning they said, I might be able to fill one of those 10. Now, they said, now, if I was looking outside of my immediate workforce, not in my backyard, so now I'm looking in other states, they said maybe I could fill two or three. But that is then the big risk that these firms are taking. The small ones is basically bringing on more work, then does the quality go down? Can you keep up with it? Are you really doing the best that you can? And when we talk about taxes, the requirements of in the US, that is, of the IRS, the expectation of that tax professional is no longer just that's the taxpayer's tax return. It doesn't matter, because we're looking at
Yep.
recent court cases where the IRS and in tax court is saying, listen, yes, that client is responsible for their tax, but my gosh, you should have better advised them. You should know better on some of these issues. And that probably is all about having enough time to provide that quality. And so, what really you're bringing to the table with June 15 Consulting is that direct connect. Because of our friendship, I then asked a follow up question, which was, would you rather go through an agency to hire talent outside? And I just even said outside of your backyard, whether that's in another state or in another country. I said, would you rather go through an agency, or would you rather it be that those employees are directly working for you? And it was near 100% of small firm owners that said they would rather have that employee either out of state or elsewhere in India, working directly for them, not having a barrier. And it really didn't come down to per se the cost, wasn't about the cost concern of a third party. It was more just about the fact of control of the information, the integrity of protecting the information. But you know what the number one concern was, and you nailed it, is like with my firm, until Cooper really came on board and we met Andy Root, we met Darren Root. These are folks that you know who these people are. But
Mm.
in their group, they talked about some of the technology that they're using. We adopted it only because my son, being in his early 20s, took that on. But all I'm saying is that those that are my age and older, the biggest barrier then is the security. And what I like with what you're doing is you're not just finding the talent, you're doing so much more to that. And really, to close out, and audience, we're not trying for this to be a commercial for Anshul, but I really felt such a pull to team up, to partner with Anshul as part of this Inspire campaign. I would probably say I have the mindset of what I want to do with this, but Anshul is right there parallel, wanting to do the exact same things. And with that, again, I would love for you to share a little bit, because my personal experience with you is it's not just you finding the talent, but finding those other solutions that really is this main concern for the smaller practice, which is, how do I actually do it? How do I actually do it in a secure manner?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's three things that a small firm needs to succeed with offshoring, succeed with going direct. Right. First is coaching, right? They need a lot of coaching around just education around, all right, how do I recruit people? What processes do I need to change? How do I train them? How do I get the results that I want? So you have to work with them as a coach. You have to, and it's not just a one time thing, right? You have to coach them on an ongoing basis, right? So, like when we started, right, for this past busy season, when I helped you work with somebody in India, right, there was some coaching involved that, all right, this is how you train them, this is how you give them instructions. Make sure you copy me in the email so I can pick up those cues if something goes wrong. So with that coaching, what happens is that you don't have to worry about making sure everything is right. You can work as you do, and you have me to catch the crumbs that, all right, oh, bro, that's not how we do it. So that helps you because you already don't have time to figure out how to work with somebody in a new country. And then the second is the compliance part, right? So Jitendra on our test, he talked about that a bit. Now, if you're a small firm, you don't need to register your entity in an offshore location, right? While the compliance isn't too difficult, right? It's still time consuming, right? So you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure that you use a PEO or an employer of record, because that way you still own the employee relationship, right? I think you shared the term with me, common law employees, right? So they're still your common law employees, but you don't have to worry about the compliance part, all of that part. And then the third is you need on the ground support, right? You need computers, right? Computers may break, you may need to find a vendor to fix them. all of those things, right? You need to have that one-stop shop, right? So for us, you can text me, hey, this guy that I hired in India, they broke, right? Their computer broke. I don't know how to fix it. It's the middle of March, needs to be fixed tomorrow or today, right? So all of those things, right? I take care of all of those things. And again, I don't want to sell or pitch right now, but the ideal is that those are the three things that small firms look for and get with direct ownership. And yeah, I want to add, I got so many emails from accountants, from people working in the CPA profession that, hey, let's partner on this. Let's do something about direct ownership, or let me be the face, or let's do something. But the reason I was very gravitated towards working with you and or like just educating others with you about offshoring and all of that, it was because your goal was bigger. You were not interested in partnering financially. You told me that I don't need you to give me revenue share. I don't need you to do we don't need to get into a formal relationship. I just want others to I just as you said, like the podcast, we just want to inspire others to embrace the globalization of the CPA profession. And that stood out for me because I believe that too, that CPA profession going global is one of the best things that could have happened. And a few years back, we're going to look at it and it'll be amusing to see, there were people who were resisting it. So I'll
Yeah.
stop there. I know
Yeah.
we're running out of time.
And I'm hoping that for our audience, and we so appreciate you tuning in. And for those that have watched multiple episodes, we so appreciate that. We'd love it if you would share this. But hopefully, what you're hearing is a true passion and a true desire to do one thing, and that is to inspire those that are a part of this profession, this great profession of accounting, as well as then I would say more specifically, the CPA designation. And so with that, Angela, I'm looking forward to other guests that you will be lining up for us. The kind of guests we're bringing are the inside scoop. We are not trying to bring guests that are going to be good for social media ratings. What we're trying to find is guests that are going to help break down barriers and again, help Anshul and I inspire. So with that, Angel, thank you for everything. I appreciate you. Such an honor to part with you. Can't wait for us to get together in person here in the States. I believe we're going to do that as well as then our trip to India.
Sounds good. Always a pleasure. Thank you, JJ. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome.